Hi, this is Pat McDonald, your host for Vote for Vermont, where our tagline is Listening Beyond the Soundbites. Joining me in the studio today is Representative Anne Donahue from Washington 1. Welcome.
Right. Thank you so much. Good to be here.
Yeah, thank you. Nice to see you. It's been a while. Shame on us. That's good. We live in the same town. Anne is my representative. And
I brought my form for you to sign,
oh,
my
excellent.
petition.
You have any lawn signs yet? Anything?
Not pretty. It's a little early for that.
Oh, well, I have Mike Pichak's on my lawn, so it's just sitting there.
Yeah.
My husband said, "Isn't it a little early?" I said, "It doesn't matter,"
Yeah.
because he did it. We did a great interview with him.
I like him a lot.
I do too. He's wonderful.
I worked with him a fair amount on the health insurance things in the legislature, and he was very impressive.
He's so caring, and so
Yes.
I just love him.
Yep.
I've had him on my radio show and obviously here, so he had a sign with him. I told him to put it up, and here we are.
Yeah.
So anyway, for those viewers who may not know, how long have you been our rep? Many years.
2003.
Oh, good for you. Very nice. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself and your work at Counterpoint and all the things that you do?
Sure. Well, actually, I just last summer have retired after 25 years as editor of Counterpoint, which of course is the state's mental health newspaper.
Right.
And I got into that because I had gone through a very severe mental illness, multiple hospitalizations. And it was actually partly through that, covering the legislature, that I got very interested in getting more involved in public policy, and that's when I ran for office.
Well, you have been such a supporter for mental health and all your whole years in the legislature. I mean, every sort of the go-to person when I had a question about any bills or mental health, and
Yeah.
I'm sure you're such an advocate, Anne, for them, and thank you for that. Because mental health is a serious issue in this state. Well, I'm everywhere, I'm sure.
And we think sometimes if you talk to people, oh yeah, there's no stigma anymore. Oh yeah, there's parity. We are so far from parity. We are so far from recognizing how integral it is just as a part of our health like any other kind.
Right. I know you pointed out, I don't mean to skip around here, but you pointed out when I had you on the show a while ago that they kept mental health issues separate.
Yes.
From health issues.
For a long time.
Which automatically separated them and made them different.
Right.
And I never thought about it.
No, they did that for a while, but then finally it was like, no, we need to shift mental health to be under the healthcare committee. It's part of health.
Right, exactly. Well, but you know how sad it is. I never thought about it. It was just what it was.
Yep.
Until you brought that up, and I went, wow, that's bad. Very bad. Anyway, so you have announced that you are, I'm assuming you've announced, you were at a meeting the other night and said you're running for re-election.
I am,
So
yes.
good for you.
Thank
What
you.
keeps you coming back?
You know, people often ask me in, February, March, am I coming back? And I always say, I don't make that decision till the end of the term.
Right.
And the first question I ask is, do I think I'm still making a difference? And then if my answer is yes, then what I feel I'm doing is turning around to my constituents and asking, do you feel I'm still making a difference for you? And then they get to weigh in.
Well, you know I've said this before about you. There's very few, if any, that actually read every bill, and you do. And you can speak about every bill on the floor if you have to. And I was always impressed with that. When I was in the legislature, I remember calling you pretty late at night, and there you were, just like me, working on bills and
prepping for the next day.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for that. There was, I forget his name, there was a legislator from Bristol. Years ago, he read every bill too. I wish I remembered his name because he deserves a shout out as well. Because nobody does it anymore.
Yeah, I know. You know what's scary is when you think that that's like a badge of honor sort of thing. I think most people would think, what? You mean everyone doesn't read the bills before they vote on them? I have gotten into fights. It happened again this year. Towards the end, as you know, things go kind of wild. The last day, people are trying to rush conference committee reports and bill, and you won't have had a chance to read it. And I have to fight for the right to just be able to have the copy to read it before we take it up to vote and send it on its way.
Well, and some of those are like 100-page bills. And we need your vote tomorrow. I'm like, whoa, wait a minute. It's sort of like, what was it, Nancy
Tomorrow,
Pelosi?
no, I buy an hour. This year, I said, wait, you're calling this up off the calendar. It hasn't even been on the notice council yet.
Oh, wow.
I haven't gotten a copy. And they have graciously acceded to me by saying, okay, it's 2:00. We're going to do a few bills now, and then we have to break for Senate bills. We'll be reconvening at 4. We'll put that one off till 4.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. I get 2 hours to read it.
Sounds like Nancy Pelosi. Read the bill. It's 1,000 pages. It was a healthcare something.
Yeah.
You can read it after you sign it.
Yeah,
Really? Oh, nice. Yeah, when I was in there was a natural resources bill that was the same exact thing, and we just fought it, but we didn't win. They wanted it out, and there you go.
Yeah.
It's very sad. So your district, it's Washington 1. It didn't always used to be. It's Northfield and Berlin.
Yep.
That to me makes so much sense. When I was representing this area, it was part of Barry.
Right.
And I love Barry, so that worked out well for me because I could, butt in on council meetings and stuff. But I think it's a synergy between Northfield and a lot of our people that live on Route 12. I think they almost consider Northfield their town more than Berlin.
Right. Well, Riverton and the whole way up 12 and over, over Earhart Hill and all of that is really very connected.
Yeah.
I think it's much more so than the old district.
Yeah, I think this makes a lot more sense. When I heard that, I went.
We are the largest district in the state.
Are you kidding?
On a per-person basis. We are at the upper threshold. But that's part of like trying to keep towns together. I mean, you could make them perfectly balanced by chopping 5 streets off.
Right.
But we happen to be, it's a 2-member district, but on a per-member basis. We're at the upper threshold
I
of the
didn't know. Now that threshold, was it 4,000 or am I completely off base?
No, it's something like that. Yeah. So it's, ballpark, Northfield 5 and Berlin 3, to make the 8.
Right.
But it's on the upper fringe of 8 plus versus.
And a lot of land. We have, I don't know if you've done a lot of door knocking, but there's some places truly in the middle of nowhere.
Northfield too.
Yeah, I bet. I can't imagine.
Yeah.
And I know a couple of times I'm riding down this lane going, uh-oh. And then, of course, you get out with the dog with the giant chain, and they're saying, no, don't worry. I'm like, no.
I should tell you, when I was representing the first time I was going door to door in Moortown, and I was trying to follow a map and get all the roads. And there was this one little back road. It looked like a back road. Right. It had a name on it, and the further I went, it became clear that you couldn't turn around. So I kept thinking, well, it'll only be another quarter mile or so. I was going over huge rocks. And this song started coming to my head. And it's the old Beverly Hillbillies song.
Oh, yes, for sure.
And what it was, won't get many votes, but I'll have a lot of fun on Herringbrook Road.
There you go.
Which, of course, was a Class 4 road. It was not and it ended up being like 7 miles long when you went back and looked at the map. But anyway.
Well, you knocked on their door and they said hi. That's great.
Well, the first person I got to coming out on the other end with her chickens and back farm in the woods, she was stunned that I showed up at her door.
Probably the first person.
How did you find me?
Good for her. Good for you. So I was going to ask a little bit about this year and what were your priorities going into the year, and how did the year end for you on the what bills you liked, what you wanted to see accomplished? Because I heard Howard Dean say when he was thinking of running that this was the best legislature he had ever seen in Vermont, and I'm like, really?
No, I would think of it, broadly speaking, in terms of policy as probably the worst.
That's what I think. I'm with you.
Great people. Yep. They're wonderful people.
Yep.
My committee, wonderful people. But I think a lot of, I don't want to cast aspersions on the young. On the contrary, they're so important to bring young, vital voices. But everything in a balance. And a lot of young people, high aspirational goals that aren't necessarily based in reality and what you can. I mean, think of it. We're going to sue big oil for climate change in Vermont. And people are saying, well, the downside is it could be expensive, these lawsuits. And I said, you got to be kidding. There won't be any lawsuits. They'll get the bill from us and they'll laugh.
Right. Vermont, what?
They're not going to.
Right.
What town is that?
Exactly. No, when I heard him say that, I went, oh, because I published on Facebook a list of all of the tax bills that were passed or fees, something that had money to me in my pocket. It just went on and on. And then there were ones that didn't make it through that you know darn well are going to come back next year because they passed the House and didn't pass the Senate, but they'll be back.
Yeah.
Unbelievable.
So it was very discouraging. I talked with an old colleague who served with me on a committee for 6 or 8 years a little while back, and he's moved down to Alabama.
Oh.
And he was saying, you know, being in Alabama and seeing the politics there, it's horrifying. And then he said, and watching what's happening in Vermont is horrifying. And he said, supermajorities do not create. Vermont, supermajority, and Alabama, I mean, he was horrified at the supermajority conservative there, but he was just as horrified.
Because you don't get good bills. I don't know if that's English, what I just said, but you don't pass really good bills because, you know, we talk about this all the time. The best bill is the third bill. Your bill, my bill, and the compromise bill.
Right.
That doesn't tick off everybody, but doesn't maybe make everybody happy, but it's a solid, good bill.
Yeah. No, that's right. And I think a lot of the healthy dialogue, even that happens in committees typically, and negotiating and saying, well, this is important to me and so forth, it isn't forced to happen anymore. If you know you can pass, as the supermajority, if you know you can pass whatever bill that you want.
Right.
And to me, with the one balance that we've had at all this year in the legislature is that on the Senate, there's some longtime moderate senators who sort of keep some things a little bit in check, and they're all retiring.
No, I know.
It's a little scary because, you know, we're gonna have no checks at all.
No, and nobody for the young people to learn from, because there is a way, there's a reason that they do things the way they do in the State House.
Yeah.
It's tried and true. It may not make sense coming in new, but there's a reason for it, and it works. And I think the people like Jane Kitchell, what's his name?
Dick Mazza.
Dick Mazza, Senate Campion.
Campion, yeah.
He is one of the best chairs I have ever watched. He's fabulous, very respectful.
Takes a lot of
very articulate.
Takes a lot of leadership skill to be a good chair.
He's excellent, and they're all going. And Bobby Starr, I mean, seriously, do you know what? I have to break. I know we have time, but Bobby Starr, I was interviewing him on the radio today, and I looked, and I usually look up at like the VT Digger, where articles about them.
Yep.
Not many on Bobby at all, because he just went to work, did his job, didn't create waves.
Yep.
Did the compromise, did it with humor. I mean, everything out of his mouth was like a joke. It was that man is hysterical, and he just did it and didn't say how great am I, and so they didn't cover him because he didn't make noise. He just got his job done for 46 years. Sarah, I just admire him so.
So let me tell you an example, a little anecdote of something that happened on the floor this spring in terms of how controlling it can become with a supermajority. Because I know from talking to some of the younger Democrats even who don't like what they're seeing, some of them actually not running again because they felt kind of squelched from being able to take their true opinion. And I almost broke through that one time. On the last day, there was a bill, it was a cannabis bill. The House had worked on it. There were some things it was improving. There were things I didn't like. But at any rate, it went to the Senate, and the Senate held on to it till the last day, made some other changes that were mostly good, sent it back, and I looked at it, you know, in these final hours, and there was one line in it, one change, that was absolutely off the wall. And that was on the restrictions for advertising. And you know, when we originally passed that bill, one of the things I fought for is this is not about trying to expand use. If we're passing it, it's because we want it safer for people, the product, and we want to get rid of the black market. We acknowledge it's being used, and we want it regulated. But it's not to like expand something. And therefore, advertising should be very restricted, which is what happened. So one of the listed restrictions is one that says you're not allowed to use prizes or what was the other word? Prizes or something like that to induce sales.
Right.
And they struck that.
Oh, excellent. Incentives for smoking. I like it.
Incentives. You can give prizes as inducements.
Right.
The word in the bill is inducements.
Love it.
To purchase cannabis. And I mentioned it to a few people, Democrats, friends, who were horrified. And they
Right.
said, that's awful.
Yeah.
I said, well, then I'm going to offer an amendment to take that out. And people were very supportive. They were not comfortable with that. I went to the committee, and the committee chair immediately was saying, well, there isn't going to be enough time, because if we amend this, it'll have to go back to the Senate.
Right.
Well, everybody's suspending rules. If everybody wanted
Right,
the bill, it
just
would still
suspend
go
it.
through. He didn't want that ruffle. And so immediately his committee members fell in line,
Yep. Well,
split party line
Right.
vote. But it got to the floor, and we made our arguments, and it was a voice vote. And wow, it sounded close. So right as the speaker said, the ayes appear to have it, somebody called for division.
Right.
So we had division, and even though people had to stand up in front of their leadership, there were a lot of Democrats standing up.
Whoa.
And I was looking around saying, well, I can't possibly count heads, standing looking around,
Right.
but it looks pretty close. So then everybody sits down, and everybody's waiting for the count, and then the clerk goes to the speaker, and all of a sudden there's like a little bit of huddle, like something's askew. And the speaker says, just give us a minute, we want to make sure everything's done correctly,
Yep.
which was odd. And then all of a sudden, after a few minutes after that, one of the Democratic leadership people got up and requested a roll call.
Oh. Whoa.
The vote was split. It was a 50-50 vote. It was a tie
Oh, my
vote.
word.
But once it was a roll call, people had to put their name on
Right,
it. And they
right.
dropped out. It still only lost by about 8 or 9 votes.
Wow.
But there was no way they were going to let
Yeah, for
that
sure.
go through.
The word was out.
They had the time to be sending those text messages saying,
Right.
get back in line.
That's right. Oh, that's sad.
Yeah.
And that's bad for that.
And it's bad. That's the law now.
Right.
You can use prizes and awards to induce sales.
I don't even love it. All right. There you go. And speaking of all of this, there'll be a veto session because the governor's very busy with his veto pen these days.
Yes.
And he hasn't vetoed the one bill I can't stand. And I talked to him about it, and I know he doesn't like it either, but maybe he'll let it go through H707, the Workforce Development Bill.
Oh.
I am so angry that they took that responsibility out of the Department of Labor. What is it there for?
There are a lot of bills that I think are problematic for a lot of reasons, but I think you're right. Vetoing it at this point, there's too many. I think he's trying to go after the
really important,
most damaging
right.
ones that are most detrimental to Vermonters.
Because I ran to him when we were out, both of us were out shopping at the same place, and we were cabbing. I said, are you going to veto H707? He said, well, I'm certainly thinking about it because I disagree. Because they want him to be in charge of workforce development, to have the, whatever they're going to call this, czar of workforce development, and an administrative assistant be in the 5th floor with the governor. And, he's already got education. We know how good that goes.
Well, they tried to turn that around.
Right, exactly. I mean, it's just wrong. And if the Department of Labor is not doing the right thing, put it in statute what you expect, hold them accountable, or have change the commissioner.
One of the problems that I've been seeing this year is how many decisions seem to be based on specific personalities. That's not a way to make policy,
No.
but we talk about education,
Yeah.
We don't like who's being chosen for this position now, so we're going to change the whole system. Fish and Wildlife, that finally
was
died.
huge, right.
But we're mad at a decision they made, so we're going to eliminate the Fish and Wildlife Board's authority.
Right.
Because we don't like one decision. So we have the power, and we'll teach you to go against what we want.
That's a very bad way to run an airline, based on one decision.
Right.
That's just bad.
As you know, reactionary law is always a problem. But I think when it's particularly to individual people, it makes it worse.
So just so folks know, you are on the Human Services Committee in the House, and you're its ranking member. There you go. And I wanted to talk a little bit about all the bills that were assigned to your committee. I counted them up. There were 63 bills on your wall.
Right.
And I know it's impossible to take up that many. How do you know how? I think 18 bills were reviewed and passed out.
Over 2 years, you're right.
2 years, exactly. How do you decide? Is it a committee discussion about what comes off the wall and what gets taken up, or is it the Speaker of the House, or you will do this?
It's a whole combination, and it does vary by chairs. I've served under different chairs. So some chairs really do those color buttons on the wall, which ones get the most votes. But there's some core bills, even if they're not on the wall, that are the priorities of the majority party. So that is the Speaker and the chair saying, we are going to do this. And it may or may not come under a numbered bill because there happens to be one on the topic, that's been. But those are sort of predetermined. And then it's sort of, well, what are people's other priorities? And a lot of times these days with some of the big, leadership priorities, there isn't a lot of time to get to some of those other bills. So we did have a short discussion, what do other people have as things they want to take up? And we did do a few added things. But a lot of it, as you know, some of the politics is if the Senate, you also have to pass the bills, the Senate, and if you don't pay attention to their bills,
they get
yours are not going to get.
That's right.
So there may be one or two that we didn't really like, but we took them up.
It seemed more chaotic this year, and maybe because I have another job, another hat that I monitor certain bills and certain committees, and so when they put the schedule out, that didn't mean in the last couple of weeks anything that was on that schedule was going to happen.
No, and it was the tempo was very odd. Even up till the last week or so, you don't usually see this. It was like we'd go several days in a row with nothing on the floor, things all being pushed back or whatever, and then we'd be on the floor till 10 o'clock at night. It was this very, very much more uneven, and I'm not sure what accounts for that.
That's what it seemed to me, because I was trying to find the bill, finding them, so I could report on them. That was a toughie too, because I found it very frustrating at home. Although I will say, don't ever take Zoom away. It is so encouraging because in a committee room, what do you get? 8 people from the public? On Zoom, sometimes there's 40, 50 people listening in. I love it.
It's wonderful. We've finally gotten used to it. I think you have to remember, back the way we used to operate and all that, it's pretty scary to think, a lot of good things happen out of interpersonal dynamics. And that includes joking around and sharing things. And all of a sudden, not only are you on Zoom, but it's archived. Some little clip can show up 10 years from now on somebody's YouTube,
Yeah, right, exactly.
without even AI out
and
there.
And edited, right? Cut out before,
So you do have to be more careful about how casual you are just in the bonding process.
And there are some people
but we're getting used to it.
that need to learn how to either slow down or articulate and quit messing with the papers.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, my. Sometimes I'm home going, stop it, because you can't hear a thing because somebody's messing with the papers. But I still love it. It's so much better.
It's wonderful for
the public.
For the public, especially. I mean, you could get in fairly easily, but people all over the state really didn't have access the way they do now.
Well, and a lot of people, believe it or not, are kind of afraid. They don't know what to expect, and so they're not so crazy going up there. I told this story once when I was Commissioner of Motor Vehicles. Any new employee, I took them over to the State House and gave them a tour.
Yeah.
Because we're sitting right there, directly across from the State House. We're there because of the legislature. I said, you need to know why you're here.
Go ahead.
I'm sorry. I took one woman over. She was started to lag behind me. I turned around. She was, I'm not exaggerating, shaking like a leaf and sweating. I'm like, I'm not going to say her name for sure, but what, are you all right? I've never been here. I'm scared to death. I'm thinking, good grief, who's out there that feels this way?
Well, I was just going to say, the number of people, and this isn't remotely like your experience with that person, but a lot of people who are maybe touring or maybe somebody I know and they're in the building. And I said, yeah, if you want to look in on, on something a committee's doing, pick an interest of yours. And I said, the door being closed doesn't mean you can't go in. You just go in quietly, but you don't knock. And they're like, what? They're just astounded. You don't knock, you just go in?
Well, and I think we're more accessible than other. I worked for a company in New York, and when we would go up to testify, we would practice. And I was told what to wear, but suit, blah, 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 and everybody was told what to wear. We practiced, and when you went up there were like little robots, and it was very formal.
Yeah.
And my first time, this is a true story, I had my script, my speech, and I went in to talk about early closing, like if people were closing a company or something. So I was with AIV. They asked me to testify against it. I got up there, and I read the room immediately, and I put my speech down. I said, hi, I'm Pat McDonald. And because that's how it is up there.
Yeah.
It's nothing like New York.
Right.
It was really very informal, and that's how you get things done. So I have, as you saw when I sent you this stuff, I have so many things that your committee did take up. Is there anything in particular that was something you were very, very interested in and wanted to get heard and out and passed?
I think that there were bills that were not the quote sexy ones that were really important work that I was glad to see us do, because often they don't get attention. And yes, one in particular was about child abuse and neglect, and updating the system for putting people on the registry.
DCF, Larry Chris?
So the thing is, what a lot of people don't realize, when you think of people who are, lower income, and you think of the job access, being on the child abuse registry cuts out probably a third of the jobs in the state.
Exactly.
You can't be an aide at a school, you can't work in a nursing, you can't anything. So we need to make sure that it's accurate.
Yep.
And I'm not suggesting that people who have been abusive should be allowed to work with vulnerable people, but we have to make sure we get it right.
Well, thank you for that.
And it's been very out of date, and it needed more, integrity to the system.
I'm sure you read the report that Larry and Bill, I did two shows on that, and I actually did a follow-up show because I was just shocked.
And Larry testified.
Yes.
We had some of those voices in, and there was a lot of good work, and this is something I think the public doesn't understand. I think sometimes you hear the word lobbyist, and it's like, oh, those are the bad people. But there are advocates who represent important interests who, you get to know them, where they're coming from, and that they do good, and you put them together.
Yep.
You say, okay, I know you're a fierce advocate, you and the commissioner and the deputy commissioner and this other person, if you agree on this, we'll know this is an appropriate way to grow. Now, if you can't agree, we'll have to make a decision and we'll sort it out. You're saying this, you're saying that, and you argue your points. But if you can come to agreement, we don't have to take 4 hours of testimony from each of you if 3 hours from each of you are going to be the same.
Yep. Well, in this case, they had a new commissioner.
Yes.
And he really took an interest in this report.
He definitely did.
And I think he understood it, and maybe because he was new and he was looking at it with maybe different eyes. And I would think that employees would want more guidance.
Yes.
I think if I was an employee making those kind of decisions, and that list that you were referring to was not intended to be a hire, no hire list. It was just intended for an internal document.
That's right, but what it's grown and become. And the same thing, last year, we did the same thing with the Adult Protection Registry.
Oh, really? Good.
Where, same issue, smaller in scope, but same
thing.
issue.
Well, it impacts people getting jobs. I mean, and you're right, or you're even associated, forget it, you know. And what Larry and Bill found out was that, I don't know what the percentage, high percentage of people shouldn't have been on that list. I mean,
that's right.
How terrible is that for them?
It was a very cursory,
right.
It was, there was misinformation that wasn't checked out.
Right.
There were a lot of issues and problems. And a lot of times, these are folks who, you know, they can't go and hire a lawyer to defend themselves.
Yeah, I was just going to say, a lot of these don't have the money that's required under the old system to actually defend yourself.
Right.
Yes, thank you for that.
I think those were really important, and that's the kind of bill where everyone has the same goal, and we can work well together, and, you know, it's not, I mean, we passed some very problematic bills.
Well, that whole area of human services, of health, the cost of health, and mental health, it's
well, yeah,
scary.
that's huge. We were looking at we were looking at the homelessness and the hotel problem and what to do about that. And our committee had a very sympathetic view, which I sympathize with, but there's only so much we can do.
Right.
And they would have sort of really expanded the program beyond even what it is now, as opposed to try to cut back. Our committee also did the overdose prevention site bill.
Oh, I did not follow that. How did that come out? Do we have any sites approved, or they said no to that?
No, one site, it was approved to go ahead for one site for Burlington.
Oh.
A pilot in Burlington, right? I don't think that's gotten to the governor's desk yet.
Oh, nice.
I think it will probably be vetoed.
People on the show that very supportive of it. I was struggling with that concept for a long time, but by the end of the show, I was like, well, maybe I don't know. I still don't know yet. We'll see.
You know, I struggled back at the time of you know, like the Narcan, and I reached the conclusion that yes, it was vital. It's the only way we're going to be able to help these people. I think people are trying to make that analogy, and it's not the same with the overdose prevention, because what I fear, yes, it will save some lives, but how many lives will it lose because of people who are less afraid to go ahead because they've got that backup there? And I don't think we know, and that's one of the big problems. Is it's like, once again, it's Vermont, you know, breaking new ground, doing something that there's very little track record elsewhere, and where there is a track record, it is in very developed urban areas where there's a very you know, close, you know, very very near to a lot of people that we can't really draw that.
I don't know if he testified in front of your committee. Ed Baker, who has a TV show on in the Burlington Public Access about recovery.
Right.
And he is so articulate and very supportive of these centers.
Yeah.
And I really listen to him, and I do respect his thoughts. He's very articulate. And he himself is he's in 38 years of recovery.
Wow.
So he's done it right.
Yeah.
And he's continuing to do that. Although it's interesting, 38 years and he's still, it's there. Mm-hmm. It doesn't go away, does it?
Right, that's right.
That's a scary thing to think about, that even 38, 40, 50 years and you slip once and who knows? It's a lot of courage for 38 years. Well, you guys have done a wonderful job. And who's the chair of your committee?
Teresa Wood.
Oh, yes,
you'll know that name. Former, I mean,
yes, from Waterbury.
That's right, and she, you know, she brings that wealth of information from having been a commissioner.
Yes,
you know,
for
and
sure.
having really understanding.
Well, and she took a lead role in the recovery in Waterbury. Everybody loves her.
She's a wonderful chair. She's somebody who really wants to get consensus, and she knows she's not always going to get there, but she really wants it. It matters to her. She doesn't want to just push through, well, I can get 8 votes, so
let's go,
let's go with it.
Right.
She wants to hear everyone. She wants to try to bring it together.
Right. Well, she was very supportive of the DCF legislation we were just talking about. She got it.
Yep.
She got it.
Completely.
That's great. Oh, I love Teresa. She's wonderful.
Yeah.
So you yourself, under your name in the in the legislative records there, you sponsored or signed on to about 50 bills this year. Did you know that? 50 of them. A lot of them were resolutions as well.
Right.
So that's
local
all
community
included.
resolutions.
Right, exactly.
And,
so
and signing on, of course, is not the same as being the lead. I'll tell you the most disappointing one for me, because you know well the challenge, as you said, 63 bills on our committee wall. The challenge of one bill making it through the process. And so when you get one that's 95% there and it dies, it's very heartbreaking.
What was that?
That was our right to repair bill.
The agricultural equipment. I knew you wanted to talk about that.
Yeah.
Talk about, because that started with a young man in Berlin, didn't it?
Yes, that's right.
Yes.
He was he was an 8th grader last year, freshman this year in school, and just an incredibly articulate speaker, and who also understood the tactic, if you will, the approach we were using. I was working very closely with another representative, and she introduced the agriculture right to repair, and I introduced the broad one.
Right.
And the plan was, year one, we do agriculture. We take the smaller bite.
Right.
That gets everyone familiar with the importance and the topic, and then next time.
Broaden out.
And this young man, I mean, he repairs cell phones and all. He has no interest in agriculture equipment. But he got it, and he became a real advocate for this agriculture right to repair bill, because he recognized this was the path to take. The House did a great job of hearing from both sides and all that, because some of the big manufacturers were, this'll hurt our business and so forth. Got a good bill out. It got over to the Senate. For a long time, we thought they weren't going to get a bill out at all. They took a lot of testimony, then they didn't move, they moved. And then in the last week, they voted out a bill that was not worth passing. It was so gutted that it would have been harmful to pass it.
Wow.
So it ended up coming back over to the House, and with no time to try to negotiate a stronger bill or anything. It was...
And so tell people this, if you do your own repairs now, does it impact the warranty? Is that what happens? Why?
Well,
what's the objection to this?
You can't, it's kind of a monopoly objection.
Right.
You can't get instructions, you can't get the guides, you can't get the parts. You have to order the parts through the manufacturer. There's all of these controls. And what they got in the House was something that was acceptable to the manufacturers, that protected the fact that their proprietary information did not get shared or abused. And that put restrictions, like it doesn't mean you can go out, Mr. Farmer, and remove the, I don't know what, the catalytic converter, so all of a sudden it's spewing oil. No, so it was a good balance when it came out. But when the Senate voted for it, just saying, well, yes, we're going to pass the bill, but if any of these big companies have a memorandum of understanding that they're going to do these things, then they're off the hook with the law. Well, a memorandum of understanding has no teeth at all.
Right, exactly.
And, it just...
we all understand. See ya.
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
Wonderful. So you're going to reintroduce it next
Oh, yeah.
year? Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah, we'll try again. And sometimes if there are enough people back on the committees, they'll feel familiar with the topic enough to want to push it internally. And
maybe in between times, somebody will have a direct experience. They'll say, hey.
have more. Yep.
Yeah, right.
Yep.
That just makes so much sense. But, hey, don't let that stop you. So there was one other bill that I think you and I talked about, you want to talk about, was your mobile home.
Oh, I was very,
floodplain.
Well, I was very pleased until the last minute. I don't know what's going to happen to it. Yes, after the floods last year.
Right,
and
which Berlin got hit big time.
Big time, and I tried to spend time, trying to help in terms of helping people make connections. They were so left out of the information loop, really struggling in those early weeks. And one of the things that just really, sometimes it makes the point, it hits home so directly. I met a man, middle-aged man, but he had recently married, and both sets of parents, as a wedding gift, got them a mobile home.
Whoa.
And
that's a great gift.
yeah, I think it was a used one, but it was a good one. And they put it in the Berlin Park there, and they were destroyed by the flood.
Now,
Totally
when that was wiped out from Irene, they built up.
Not by much, not by enough.
Oh, not enough, huh?
Not by enough.
Because that was a disaster in Irene.
Yes,
oh my God.
yes. So, so and they had no idea it had a flood history.
Aren't you supposed to tell people that?
We don't require it in the law, by gosh.
Oh, well, I think we should.
Most states do.
I would think so.
So, here's how politics works, Pat. I know you don't know anything about politics.
I'll be shocked, I'm sure.
So, the committee in the House was very receptive to my bill, and what they did is they included it with other pieces people had submitted about rental and house home purchases, but putting the bill in meant I made sure that they included that, which they did. So it came out as an overall
miscellaneous bill,
flooding resilience type thing. If you remember, there were a lot of big moving chunks. The House sent over this huge housing bill that had a huge amount of money attached to it. And then there was the whole Act 250 report. There were all these pieces. And in the Senate, they kind of glued them all together and said, okay, we're putting it together here. It's back to you, House. It's all one piece now. The mobile home, the whole flood, informed consent kind of thing for flood risk, including the home, the Senate included that in the big bill. And that's the bill that has millions of dollars for housing. And has major changes to Act 250, and I don't know that it's not going to get vetoed. So this little bill that would have been no problem, on its own, is now kind of subject to the much bigger
And all
politics.
you were asking for was a notification?
Yeah.
I mean, that is...
a prominent piece of information letting people know that it's...
I thought in a house they have to tell you. Is that a requirement? No.
The reason it does happen is because most people can't buy a house without a mortgage. And the mortgager, the bank will require it. They will make sure. But if you, and realtors also. But if you're not using a realtor, you don't, it's not a legal requirement.
I think you should know.
Yeah.
We bought our house and the former owner said, oh, we've only had water in our bulkhead. We've been flooded out several times in the basement. Never in the bulkhead, ever. Just saying.
Yeah.
But we've managed to fix it over the years. But, you should know this stuff.
You should.
Especially mobile homes. The one on the 302, they finally closed that one.
Yeah.
I forget the name of it, but that was devastating. I was on the
river
run. That was just, what happened to those people was just terrible. And it's right, they were right on the river. That would have been my first clue. But it was a beautiful setting, and the river run by and blah, 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 and then it ran through your house and just destroyed everything.
Yeah.
I'm glad they closed that because there is no way you could fix that.
Yeah.
That's really sad. So, Anne, you have to tell folks, you became you're my hero anyway, but you became my superhero when you stood up on the floor and spoke to the Appropriations Committee about what they should do with the budget. And the amount, seriously, I was screaming again, but in support. I was going, go in.
When they were playing this is our budget, folks, okay? To vote on it. Look, it's all nicely balanced. It's this beautiful package. And I said, wait, but you have this housing bill for all these millions of dollars with taxes, and then you have this other bill here, the homeless bill, with all these millions and millions of dollars, and you don't have them as part of the budget. That's not a balanced budget. That's part of what will be in the budget. How can we be voting for a budget and say it's a balanced budget, no new taxes, when you've got all these things that are going to be a part? This is a fake budget.
I really applaud you for that, and I shouldn't say it's about time, but that should have been brought up ages ago. It happens every year.
Well, it never happens as badly, never as big a way. And I must say, all due credit, I was so happy because I think it was in VT Digger, I saw a quote from Jane Kitchell saying, well, that's not what's going to happen in the Senate. It's going to be in what budget?
Really?
Yes, she
Good
said
for
that.
her.
And it almost all did. It was just,
Great.
you know, one small piece. It really almost all did. And of course, we're losing her and her
I know,
common
we are
sense.
losing so many great leaders.
Yeah, we are.
But that's so disingenuous of the House and of the legislators. Then, of course, my favorite is the budget adjustment, which you never hear about,
Right.
which increases. It never decreases. It always increases the budget.
It increases, and then that becomes the new baseline.
Right, exactly.
So when you say, oh, we only increased by this %,
Yeah,
well, that's after it was adjusted. It's
right.
not what we passed
But
last
we're not very
year.
honest about that.
No, we're not.
I wrote an article, I don't know if you saw it, I think I might have sent it to you. It was in the Campaign for Vermont's newsletter, and it went all over the place. And I said, they should spend money buying a clock. You know, like you see on TV with the debt clock?
Oh, yeah, yeah.
And every time, well, in this bill you've got...
Ka-ching, ka-ching, ka-ching.
Because they take bills separately.
Yeah.
And you focus on that, and it's only $5 million, but it's for the kids.
Yeah.
So, okay, fine. And, we're feeding the kids. But if that clock would just keep going, maybe
Well, you know,
we'd
you didn't hear it mentioned much this year, but you certainly heard the property tax and these skyrocketing school budgets.
Right.
And the fact that we spent, you know, $200 million increase from last year. But we all voted to feed the kids.
Right.
That was $25 million. That was,
Right,
you know, an
right.
eighth. That was a big chunk. And I voted for it. I
Yep.
was in a minority in my caucus, but
Yep.
because I had very direct, personal, compelling statements and arguments from families, from
Yep.
constituents,
Yep.
explaining why they felt it was so valuable. And I kept saying, you know, it's going to show up in the education fund. This is going to be a property tax. And that was my big reticence about it, but I did vote for it. But you didn't hear that discussed much.
Yeah,
That, you know, we did
I
that.
would have voted for it because same thing, I heard arguments and it just, you know, you're feeding children. And I have said on this show and on the radio, 1 in 7 children in this state, in an agricultural state, deal with food insufficiency and are hungry. What is that?
Well, and the counter argument is, well, all of those kids can get the assistance and can get free lunches. And it's not, they're not singled out anymore because they all do it with, you know, tickets and it's all.
Right.
But you know what? That's assuming that you have an intact, well-organized family that can cope with the paperwork and all of that. Yeah, you're making a lot of assumptions.
Yep.
And the idea that, you know, it's kind of part of school. You know, we think extracurricular activities are important for kids' development. We don't say, well, the rich kids can pay their own for their own sports equipment. It's part of school.
Right.
And so saying, you know, a meal is part of.
I agree with you. And I love the, what did they used to call the program, the food breakfast program. Somebody in my family lost their job and needed to use that program. Of course, when she went back to work, she stopped using it, but it was there for her. And I said, well, good, but now and you can't embarrass kids if they don't have the money and that sort of stuff. And you don't know, when I was on the board of Central Vermont Home Health and Hospice, and I went out on a tour with one of the nurses, had to sign all kinds of confidentiality, you know. We went to a McMansion, and you just don't know what's, as you're saying, what's behind that door, and you shouldn't even sit there and think you know, because you don't, especially with COVID and with all the stuff that people are dealing with. One of the first things that they cut back on is food, because you have to pay your mortgage, you have to pay your car, blah, 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 whatever, and food is the first thing that goes, and that's why at our food shelves, and you can ask Sue Midner, the changes in people that are going to the food shelves, not what you expect.
So I volunteer regularly at our food bank in Northfield at
nice.
Serve. 2 years ago, for 4 or 5 months, I was making active use of it simultaneously, literally the same day, that an unexpected layoff from my off-season job and my having accepted into my home a mom and child who were refugees, asylum seekers.
Oh, wow.
And I was not going to turn them out, and I
Right.
knew there were ways I could get help, one of them being, okay,
Yeah, wow.
now I don't have an income
Right.
coming in, but I know I have a community that's willing to help.
That's great.
So, yeah.
Well, and I must say this about Vermont. There are if people would only know what's out there, we have resources and support for almost every variation on the theme. Yeah. And sadly, some people don't know how to look for it or where to go, but it's there if you want
There's a lot of good.
Yeah, we do well in this state. As mad as I get politically, well, and we have things like the flood, and everybody comes out and works so hard.
Yeah.
You know, so you're going to run, knock on doors, and do your shtick. And next year, what any things you're thinking about already if you get in, which I can't imagine not, but what would you like to see happen?
Right to Repair is going to be back in there.
That makes so much sense to me. It's the things that make sense that don't make it. People always are looking for something.
Well,
this
almost did. It's not one that just stayed on the wall and nobody even took
Right.
it up. So that was the good side, but the bad side is all that
Well, you'll have
work
your
and
young
effort
man
and-
to help you, right?
Yes, I certainly hope so.
Well, I need to thank you. I'm very active in the USS Vermont submarine, and they had
great.
you signed off on HCR 176, which commemorated the torpedo man Henry Brault, who won the Medal of Honor.
Yes,
That
of course.
and who was the representative? Oh, and I met him a couple of times that really spoke on the floor about this.
Oh, yes, from Milton.
What an impressive man.
Michael Morgan.
Yes, what a great military background.
Yes,
Impressive
he's terrific.
guy.
He's my seatmate.
Oh, is he real? Oh, yes,
yeah.
he's right up front. I remember when he turned around.
Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah,
Well, thank you
we
for
have
that.
he's got a great sense of humor. We're whispering back and forth.
Yeah, no, I was very impressed with him.
Yeah.
And
He's sharp. He's very smart.
Yes, he is. And he took this and just led with it, which was a great story in itself.
Yeah.
He wasn't a Vermonter, but he was commissioned at one of the farms, maybe Maz's farm. He was, and so they said he was from here because it's where you're commissioned that designates where you're from.
Oh, okay.
So
Interesting.
that's why we say he was from Vermont.
Sure.
But great story. Anyway, thank you for that. So, you're going to ask. I saw the word Abenaki. There was one that you signed, HR 10. I'm very big on supporting the Abenaki in this state, and what they're doing up in Canada against our Abenakis are just so frustrating.
It's very, very discouraging.
Yes.
Very hard.
So you signed off on the Abenaki Recognition and Heritage Week, so thank you for that.
Yes. Well, I've been very involved with from way back on getting the the eugenics work, the resolution and so forth to acknowledge and of course they were a huge part of that.
Yep.
So.
Yeah, Don Stevens is do you know Don?
Yes,
Isn't
I
he
do.
wonderful?
Absolutely.
He's been on this show and on my radio show. I don't know how many times. I love him.
Yes.
Have you seen the Abenaki mural that they put in the Transportation Center in Montpelier?
No.
It is so fabulous. There were 8 Abenaki artists, women, who did this mural, and it's right in the on the other side by the Capitol Plaza in the back.
Right.
It's stunning.
Wow.
And I went to the unveiling.
Yep.
And they had an Abenaki chef there, who I also interviewed.
Oh, neat.
I'm not big on moose nose, but hey, he was talking about that was one of their delicacies. I said, well, maybe not. I don't know. But anyway, you have done so much good work, and I really thank you for being so involved with the people in Berlin and Northfield, because we appreciate that. You're there when we're there, and I like that.
Thank you. I do really try to stay in touch and respond.
Well, you have to. You need to know. And our towns have changed. A lot of the people have changed. We are a little bit different community than we used to be when I first went, and it's important to understand that.
Yeah.
And to know. But I also like the fact that we're very close to Northfield. It's kind of a symbiotic relationship, I think.
It really is.
For some reason, I don't know.
It really is, yeah.
You know, it's nice.
Yeah.
So anything you would like to leave our folks with in the next couple of minutes besides vote for me? Do you have a stump speech that?
No, not yet. No, keep the faith, keep the hope, keep the faith. A lot of good people working together, and we just, I think, people, constituents need to be really clear in their messages to the people who are running what their priorities are.
Right. And
to recognize that everything costs money. So it's great to want that. There isn't hardly a thing that's been proposed that I don't think would be wonderful to have and want. But you come up against, you have to stay rational in what's affordable or everything collapses.
And it has to stop, Anne. May I just say that as one of your constituents? I'm retired.
Yep.
Enough.
Yeah.
And you know what really kills me? And I love the new word, climate resilience.
Yes.
That's much better than climate change or climate control, because that to me is something we should be doing.
Well, because we, as the state of Vermont, cannot stop climate change.
Right.
And if we would get off that focus of we can stop it versus, we can do our part, but we need to really focus on how do we adapt, how do we recognize the changes.
When Mike Pichak was on the show, he was explaining that, and I thought, finally, they're making sense.
Yeah.
Because our little state, we could do absolutely everything. We wouldn't change that needle one bit, but we sure as heck should be protecting ourselves.
Yeah.
And I don't know if have you gotten involved in any of the discussions that are happening in Barre and Northfield and around about the impact of the floods and
other than Northfield has this phenomenal example of resilience because there was a water street, aptly named, with homes all down that street and the other side. And when Irene came, not only were they demolished, but the water went way up the side streets. I mean, I was helping muck out a basement.
I remember that.
That was 2/3 of the way uphill, up a street, and they devastating. So they were all the houses on the river side of the street were part of a FEMA buyout. That is now a park, but it's a carefully designed park. It's like a bowl. It's designed to be an absorption bowl.
Perfect.
And last summer, when people were hit so badly, the water spilled over that bowl. It went a little onto the street, but it did its job, and it prevented what would have been another devastating
flood. I heard that most of the responses that happened to Irene, they held fast in this latest disaster because, oh my God, and the mud in Barre.
Oh,
I was trying to help somebody from my church, and we were all down there, and I lasted an hour. I said, I can't do this. It's like lifting cement.
Yeah.
It's really bad. Well, we have come to the end of the show, and I really
It always goes so quickly.
I know it does.
Well,
that's because we gab too much. Anyway, I really want to thank you for being on the show and for all that you do for us. Good representative. Representative Anne Donahue from Washington 1. And wish you luck in your re-election. And
thank you.
We'll see you on the other side. This is Pat McDonald, your host for Vote for Vermont, where our tagline is listening beyond the sound bites. See ya.